All right, welcome back. Today is a little bit different than my usual, where I often have a script or I'm out in the field doing something, showing you a cool new feature of your Rivian or a new charging station. Today is a real special treat because I have Christian Selig, who is a developer, longtime standing in the Apple community. I first learned about Christian with the Apollo app, as I think many people did. But, that's not the only thing that he has to his name that he's done that's very interesting. And I wanted to bring him on because Christian, you're awesome. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. I'll try to live up to that.
Yeah, and B, you're into Rivians, so there's an
Yes.
amazing overlap here. And I felt like your experience with the apps that I've used means that you also have some taste when it comes to software design. You've run into hurdles as far as bugs, and what you've been able to accomplish as, I assume, primarily a solo developer, has really been impressive for the scale. And when we look at things like Rivian, well, as I told you before we started recording, I think that Rivian is miles ahead of most auto manufacturers when it comes to software. And yet, I still think that they are quite a notably gap behind the stability and usability of Tesla. You've owned a Tesla, you owned a Rivian. So I want to get into all of that, things about, UI design, bug features, what they can do to possibly improve it. We are going to talk about the CarPlay Android Auto for better or for worse. And
Excellent.
even the Volkswagen joint venture, should we have time. So that's what I'm hoping to get done. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Genuinely stoked. Not a lot of love my friends in real life, but this isn't the kind of stuff we go into too often, so it's nice to have an outlet.
When you talk about Rivian, do their eyes glaze over as if you're talking about car insurance?
No, they actually, a lot of them are like into EVs and they find it interesting. But I think like a lot of the nuanced topics, like the debates around like Android Auto and whatnot, I think are maybe not where their expertise lies. Like they know a lot of stuff more than I do, but this is, I guess, a little in the weeds for their interests, I suppose.
Fair. So first of all, why don't we start just kind of, with setting a foundation here. Let people know a little bit more about yourselves. I gave it a really brief recap. I know you've built a lot of interesting apps. We could even talk about the greater ecosystem, about building on top of other platforms between Apollo and Juno, both reaching an untimely demise, unfortunately.
Got a good streak.
Well, hey, you built something great and they want to kill it. So,
well, watch out for your podcast. This might be your last episode of this kind of thing.
Yeah, well, if this is the way I go out, I'll take it, because the things you touch next tend to do well, so that's all good. So give us a quick little recap about yourself so people understand your background and sort of the perspective that you're coming from as we dive into these more detailed topics.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess long story short, I'm a developer from Eastern Canada. I'm in Nova Scotia, so I always say like any further east and you'd be in the water. So it's about far east as you can get in Canada. There's not a lot out here. But I did the computer science degree thing. I interned at Apple for a summer, and then I kind of just did the full-time indie developer thing since then. So I've never, for better or worse, never really had a proper big boy job. So I've kind of just been riding the solo developer wave. Since I guess I was about 20, and I'm 32 next month. So it's coming quick. I've mostly just built things that kind of scratch an itch. I mean, it's not super rare in the software side of things, but I started with building an app called Apollo for Reddit, where way back when, funnily enough, when I first started the app, there wasn't even an official Reddit app to begin with. Apps were kind of this still this nascent thing that people weren't sure if it was going to stick around. Apple still had those commercials like there's an app for that. Like they actually had to tell people that apps are a thing. Now that we obviously all take it for granted, but back then there wasn't a real abundance of apps. So I used Reddit a ton and I wanted an app for myself. And I built that, and it went on to thankfully get a lot of users. People seemed to like it for whatever reason, and I did that for about 9 years. And then there was a bunch of stuff with Reddit's API. The price increased like substantially with relatively short notice, so I wasn't able to keep doing that. But it's one of those one door closes, another one opens kind of things. So yeah, I've mostly been doing the software thing for a while. I randomly ventured into the YouTube side of things, doing a few videos here and there, and that's been really rewarding creatively in the same way I guess app development is. I guess like when it comes down to us, we're all just like building things and putting it out in the world and hoping people enjoy them. So all kind of the same thing in a way. And I guess what about 2 months ago I got a Rivian too, and it's been amazing, and it's such a cool experience, and it's so new versus like you mentioned, I got a Tesla Model 3 in 2018, and funnily enough we still have it. It's just gathering dust in the corner of the garage. We It's literally, there's like our neighbors come by, little kids, and draw things on it all the time. There's so much dust caked onto it. But so I have a lot of experience there too. So it's been a fun journey, I'll say. Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So, I know that Jose over at Rivian Tracker did a great interview with you about the whole rigmarole of getting a Rivian in Nova Scotia.
Yes,
so we don't necessarily need to dive too much into that. I think if people want to check that out, they should definitely go watch that entire interview you did. But just kind of give viewers what's your spec? Like what's the actual spec of the vehicle you have so they know what your Rivian context is. I believe it's a Gen 2.
Correct. Yeah. So it was, like you said, it was a lot. I've never had more trouble giving a company like almost $100,000 before in my life. But yeah, there's no service centers out here, so they were kind of trepidatious. But I ended up, they were doing the whole thing. I think it's tariff related, where they were basically like, we're raising the prices in Canada. And I was like, okay, if before you raise the prices, could you please just sell me one? Like I've been trying to give you like before that gets even worse. Like, and they were like, fine, okay. And I got a dual motor max back. So I kind of went whole hog on the range model, I guess. So I was like the tri-motor and everything, and even the quad now looks super cool. But I was like, I don't want to sacrifice, if I could get 1 more horsepower, or if I could get 1,000 more horsepower for like 5 extra miles lost, like I wouldn't take that trade. Like I want range. We don't have a lot of chargers around here. So I went full spec on that. It's green. And I think everything else, I guess I got the premium audio, but everything else is bone stock.
Premium audio.
Yeah.
With air quotes for those that are
I cannot imagine what the bass audio sounds like, but it's...
And what wheel set on there? If you're worried about range, I assume you want the range optimized wheels.
Yeah, exactly. That was another part that confused me as a buyer, because it was the spec was just whatever the base 22-inch was like. It was like 410 miles, and then it was like you can change to the range wheel and get 410 miles. And I was like, okay, not much range gained at least. So anyway, and it was more money to go up to the range tire that had no range. So I just went with the spec.
Yeah, that
came included.
That's definitely the move. I mean, I like the aesthetic of the range wheels.
Oh, totally.
But the efficiency is like literally a couple miles potentially of difference.
Right. And I assume there's something, but I was just like, why is there nothing listed here?
Yeah, the big difference compared to Gen 1, and we'll move on because if someone's here for software, they don't probably give a crap about the wheels. But the reality is that the rubber on the wheel makes a much bigger difference for the rolling resistance. And so in the past, when you had there was the 21-inch, which was the oddball size for road wheels, and the compound on that had a much better rolling resistance. And so that's really where the savings came from compared to the 22-inch Sport. And then, of course, compared to the all-terrains, whereas for Gen 2, they streamlined it so the actual tire that's on the wheel for range and Sport is exactly the same. Whereas,
Gotcha.
The range does have the aero caps on it, but that difference is really pretty minimal. And then you see, the jump to like the all-terrains, even though it's a smaller wheel, because traditionally look at like Tesla, right? The smaller wheels always got better range, but you go down to the 20s and you get worse range. It's because of that big aggressive knobby tread on the all-terrain wheels more than anything.
They look so cool. I have to get winter tires eventually, just because like it snows so much here in the winter. So I'm like, okay, I'll probably get a second set of rims for that, and I think I'll get the 20s just because I'm going to lose range in the winter anyway. And those thick fancy sidewalls, it really fits the Rivian build, I think, for the kind of adventurous. For sure. Aesthetic pretty well.
Cool. So let's talk about the software then. So, you've had it for just a couple of months. So that means you've gone through several cycles of software updates, but that means you haven't gone through the more extensive ones. Cause like when we got our Gen 2 vehicles, we were pretty early Gen 2 build. And so, I mean, even on the driver assistance, for example, it used to scream at you on even the lightest bend about like, there's a curve coming ahead. I'm not sure what's going to happen to, now I can change lanes, do it confidently. I can slow to hit a gap. I can speed up to hit a gap. There's been 3 huge improvements on audio. It was from the worst audio ever that I've ever heard, full stop, including like the cheapest rental Kia you could ever imagine, to at least like somewhat passable now, but still not, in my opinion, good enough for the price point, especially
and just to gas you up, I will say like your review on that was like one of the best ones I had ever before I got the Rivian, because I was watching that and I remember reading all these people in the subreddit saying like you'd look 8 months ago and they'd be like, the audio was ass, and then like 6 months would pass and they'd be like, no, it's not too bad now. And I was like, what's going on here? Like, is this just different users? And you kind of broke it down like, no, there's been this progression of software updates. Like I've and it was all coming from one person who had seen the full journey. So that was really helpful, being like, okay, there's been a progression here, and hopefully that progression keeps going. But yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, I'm glad you found it helpful. That was one of my first real videos. I think you're referring to the 6-month review, the brutally honest 6-month review. Yeah. So it has been interesting to watch the progression, but that really underscores the value of a software-defined vehicle, in my opinion, that so many of the components, top to bottom, are addressable through software. But one thing I've noticed, at least in my experience on Rivian, that was very starkly different than Tesla is that it's always kind of like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, it feels like. They introduce new things and then we get new, weird, quirky bugs in a way that's kind of like, did anyone use this? Is what it feels like sometimes. And so you as a software developer, when you're going through even just a couple cycles, have you experienced that firsthand on your Rivian?
Oh, for sure. It's been weird. And I will say, I guess I can say as a software developer, but like I said, I've never had a big boy job. So like the struggles these large companies go to, like I won't pretend I have any idea what I'm talking about there, but just from a like having built software and used it, yeah, there's been like you mentioned Driver Plus, and that's been one of the weirder things for me is there's no service center here. So basically we had to go, it was like a 20-hour drive to Toronto. We flew there and we picked it up there and drove it back, which was honestly a ton of fun. But basically up until I got to my little province, I had like Driver Plus the whole way. And then it's like this map thing, as I understand. So as soon as I got into my province, I assumed there's no maps. So it fell down to boring old, like the assisted cruise control, I guess.
Traffic aware cruise control. Yeah.
That's the word. Yeah. And then I was like, okay, that's too bad. But hopefully, maybe since there's some Rivians around, it'll slowly come. And then I got a software update like a month later. And then suddenly like everywhere it had driver assist. And I'm just like, there's no way like, that it just this guy driving around Nova Scotia mapped it or something. So I'm like, probably just a coincidence. And then like another update came, and now I have not had it anywhere for another month. And I'm like, little stuff like that. And I'm just like, what is going on there? Like I've I've done the steering wheel thing and I've reset it and everything, but like I've not seen the Driver Plus in like over a month now. And it was really dope when it worked. Like my Tesla's still on the old school, like not even like full self-driving. It's like the autopilot 2.5 hardware. So couldn't change lanes. It couldn't do anything. And the Rivian just effortlessly changing lanes when you told it to was incredible. But yeah, I haven't seen it in a while.
Yeah, so Gen 1 owners are probably crying that you call it Driver Plus and you're talking about lane changing, because they did unfortunately change the name on Gen 2. It's called Rivian Autonomy Platform Plus. The most mouthful, like that sounds like it should be an MSI gaming laptop.
Yeah, or an HP monitor or something. Yeah. Okay, fair enough. And they don't get the lane at all.
So what they get is if you've ever turned on your blinker and it's complained that it thinks there's like a solid line, but you're like, I'm going to tell you to go anyway. And when you do that, you get a little blue square around your car. And when you get back in the middle, it automatically re-engages.
Oh, okay. Well, that's something.
That's essentially what Driver Plus gets at this point. But they have all the same constraints of pre-mapped highways. They do not get hands-free in any zones.
Not even hands-free. That was cool, too. I really liked that. Coming from Tesla, where it's like you're glued to the wheel, at least on my version. That was really cool.
FSD is hands-free. And it's interesting to me, if we're talking about driver assistance specifically, on Tesla, that they have left autopilot so far behind in the grand scheme of things, because it's so clearly an old stack. And so if you had a 2018, did you buy it in 2018?
I did, yeah. No, I remember it was like, it's like VIN 20,000 or something. Like it's a very early Model 3. And it's been like, for all intents and purposes, we've been really happy with it. But the full self-driving journey thing, I'm almost salty about, because I remember buying it and then being like, this, like Elon was, and he's always true to his word, so it's weird, but he was like, it has all the hardware necessary for full self-driving. We just need to work on the software. And I'm like, dope. Like I'll
as nerds, we get that.
Yeah. But I was like, I'll get the full self-driving package or whatever when the software is ready. Like I'll just wait until then. So I didn't buy in Canadian dollars, like 12 grand or whatever. I was like, I'm not gonna. I'll wait until that's ready. So then they like years later, and now it's actually pretty good. So I go to get like the $100 a month package or whatever, and they're like, no, you need to pay like $5,000 to upgrade your car's hardware. And I was like, what? You told me it had everything. So I'm like, this is all bunk for me. But
that feels like a class action lawsuit is waiting some point for that.
Honestly, like it's wild. Like I don't know how that's passable. But
well, so the reason I bring that up is because I think it's relevant to this whole like software evolution thing, because on the Model 3 and then, the Model Y and future models, they ended up removing radar. I know we're kind of bumping back to Tesla.
Right.
And
I heard that.
I would assume that your experience with even autopilot and traffic-aware cruise control was different when you first got the car versus today, where it is vision only and they have disabled the radar in your car.
Oh, interesting. So I haven't actually noticed that, truth be told. So did they, even if you have the radar, like the hardware is like dead now?
Disabled, yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay, because then, no, like, I mean, to their credit, I haven't noticed a thing. Like it still is work. Like I don't like have super challenging parking situations typically, but yeah, no, it's been fine for me. I will say I do, like, it's funny, the Rivian is such a massive vehicle compared to this little Model 3, but I would park the Rivian 99 times out of 100 over the Tesla, even in the smallest parking places, just because of that like overhead view is so OP. Like it's wild. Like I remember like all the people being like, oh, I couldn't get a Tesla, it doesn't have that. I'm like, oh, you guys are exaggerating. But no, it's legitimately like game changing, being able to like have this like Oracle level view of everything going on around you.
with
So-
confidence, because they do a
Yeah.
really good job of doing the warp correction for the wide field of view.
And the cameras themselves are like I swear to God, each one is like the level of my iPhone. It's comical level like clarity. Like I remember
4K
driving my
60
friends.
HDR. Yep.
Yeah, it's wild. It's like you have iPhones like strapped to your car. Like they are so
11 of them,
over
though.
spec. Yeah, exactly. So it's wild. So very impressed with that. But yeah, I didn't realize they nixed all the Tesla stuff. That's
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
they're doing something with vision, so I guess it's working in some capacity.
yeah. Okay, so let's talk about some of these bugs then. So when you think, I know you have the caveat of you haven't worked in these big teams, and I've only worked with small teams. I run a software company, and
Right.
so I have usually between 2 and 11 developers. So like my scale is a few more people than you, even though your apps have been way more successful than mine. And then you have Rivian levels, which quite a few more engineers than that, which is pales in comparison to Tesla.
Right.
Which pales in there's levels to all these games, and I understand that it's the mythical man hour is certainly a thing that you can't just randomly fix everything by throwing engineers at it. But when you think about some of the bugs that show up that are kind of quirky, 2 steps forward, 1 step back on these great new features, and there are some that are nailed, like that 360. I agree, like they really got that right. What do you think is introducing some of these bugs that are making it past the QA process and even past the beta testing early adopter process all the way to production in the mass fleet?
That's a great question. Obviously, only speculating, but like my experience with some software bugs is that they're like the conditions to reproduce them sometimes are like comically specific. Like I would have stuff on iPhones where like a user would be like, I don't know why you can't reproduce this. I can reproduce it 100% of the time. And it would be like if they were on the edge network with low power mode enabled and their Wi-Fi was at 1 bar. And it was like, sure enough, 99% of the time they were in those conditions. But like for me to reproduce that, like that never, those stars never aligned. So it would be like, potentially some of these bugs are like hyper specific scenarios cause them. And then whatever testing stack they have maybe doesn't explore that. But for me, it's like the weirdest thing for me hasn't even necessarily been like this feature glitched out in a way. It's like, the weird thing for me has almost been the general like slowness of things. And that's something I don't know, admittedly, how you would miss, because unless my Rivian is like running a Raspberry Pi and everyone else is on like something else. Yeah, there's just some like, I don't know how like sometimes I'll tap the air conditioner and it'll literally like, I'll count to 5 before the UI populates. And I'll be like, that I don't know how it makes it out of, software testing. Like that to me would be like an immediate, like, let's run some like, instrumentation on this to figure out what is holding up all these CPU cycles or whatever that's causing this to lag so much. Because I mean, that almost gets into like safety things. Like if you're trying to adjust the air conditioning while your car's going and you're waiting and looking at the screen for 5 seconds and then a transport truck smokes you, it's not ideal.
Yeah, not ideal for sure.
Yeah. TM. But yeah. So those are almost the more weird things to me than like the particular, like sometimes like the blue line for the navigation won't show up or something. And I'll just have to like look at the arrow like I'm following a compass. But yeah, the speed thing's definitely been the more curious thing for me.
Yeah, and to be clear, I guess, or more precise, when you're talking about slowness, you're talking about like usually touch input lag, right? So like I even noticed that like if I tap the camera button, sometimes I actually tap it multiple times before it actually triggers. And it's not necessarily like I tapped it once and if I wait long enough, it'll eventually come up. I could wait all day and it would never come up. I see it highlight, it registered the touch, but it doesn't fire the action.
Right, exactly.
And so I noticed that a lot.
As an analogy, it would be like you're using like a 10-year-old iPhone on the new OS. Like sometimes it feels like that, where you're like the functionality is all there and oftentimes it'll work eventually, but just everything takes so slow to launch. Or like you scroll and there's like this like chunk of like things processing. Like it's really weird. Like in some areas, because like I looked it up out of curiosity and the infotainment's running some like pretty impressive Snapdragon chip that would have been like a flagship chip in like Android phones from a few years ago. So this thing is like it's not running a Raspberry Pi, I guess is one way to
on
put
paper, the tech specs should be impressive.
Yeah. So it's not like this is some impossible hurdle. And again, not saying it's easy, but it's like it's weird to me that in some ways versus my 2018 Model 3, like stuff like changing songs in Spotify is like wicked fast on the Rivian versus the Tesla. Like there's all this stuff that I'm like, okay, that's where the grunt is going to work. But there's other stuff just like panning around the map or like tapping the search button and like seeing the keyboard animate into place that it's like 15 frames per second. Whereas you look at like the Tesla from 8 years ago and it's like
with the Intel Atom.
Yeah, exactly. That probably couldn't do just about anything nowadays, but it's smooth. And sure, there's areas on the UI that I feel like the Tesla is showing its age for sure. But like, I would say overwhelmingly that the Tesla UI is still a lot smoother than the Rivian one, which is like genuinely a real head scratcher to me.
Do you happen to know what the Tesla software is built on top of? Is it like some kind of Linux
That's
core?
a great question.
Because I know that, for instance, the Rivian software is actually built on top of Android Automotive.
Right. I caught that when it logged into Spotify. It was like, do you want to authorize Android Automotive? And I was like,
Which for those uninitiated and could be easily confused, that is different than Android Auto. Android Automotive is the core OS that a lot of newer cars are building their platform on top of. So everything that we see in the Rivian UI is a custom UI basically running on top of Android Automotive.
Understood. Okay. Yeah. I mean, maybe Tesla is just like deeper into the Linux subsystem or something where they get to pull the levers a little differently than Rivian, but it's yeah. If I was a betting man, I thought I read that it's some custom Linux distro or something that they're
Yeah, I believe that's correct. I should have looked that up before our call.
No, it's a good trivia question.
Yeah. So to your point though about edge case testing, one of my pet theories is that a lot of the issues that we see crop up for lagginess and whatnot seem to compound after enough runtime of the vehicle before it's been reset, which would lead me to believe that there's probably one or more likely multiple applications that have a memory leak. And so what we're running into is it's probably likely running out of resources just because of something consuming. It's like if you'd never closed Chrome on your computer.
Right.
And it just gobbled up all the available RAM. And then you go to do something and it's all glitchy. But then when you restart the car, you're like, why does it work now? Why is it fine? Well, I'm suspecting it's because it basically restarted all the apps and none of them have had enough time to gobble up all the resources and make the one thing that you want to use right now start to feel laggy or have touch input lag.
That would almost be more curious because then like they're not necessarily easy to fix memory leaks, but like they're easy to identify. Like you could at least like pull up the equivalent of like the task manager on Android Automotive presumably and go like, oh my God, Maps is taking up 7 gigs of the 8 gigs of memory. Like that's probably not good. And then it might not be easy to fix that, but at least they could identify that. Like hopefully it wouldn't be that hard to fix, but it seems to be for some reason.
Yeah. Well, so what do you think about the overall aesthetic? I mean, one thing I personally appreciate about Rivian is that they take a more friendly approach, right? They introducing Gear Guard into more of the stuff, especially with the new energy app, making goofy little faces or, being really hot and overheated if you're overstressing the system, which we found a lot on my road trip going through Moab in Texas of that little guy telling me that we were cooking the battery. But the little flourishes and overall design aesthetic of Rivian, how do you feel about that coming from a Tesla?
I really like it. I think they hit a really nice balance of making it familiar to Tesla users, which I would imagine are like the vast majority of Rivian users are like coming from an existing electric vehicle, which a lot of the time means Tesla.
Surprisingly, no, actually. Most
no?
of them, most Rivian buyers, it's their first EV.
Wow. That's
something like, I believe 70 or 80% of Rivian buyers, it's their first
Really?
EV.
Oh, wow. Okay. And that's fascinating. I wonder, is there any like psychology of like what hooks them? Is it just like the brand's power?
Well, people like to buy boxy SUVs, first of all.
Fair enough.
And
and I guess there's not a lot
Tesla
of
does not offer a
town.
boxy SUV. They offer versions of eggs or unrendered polygons. That's what you can get from Tesla.
That's fair. No, that's very fair.
If you're an ICE user, going to EV for the first time, and a Tesla user coming to Rivian, how do you feel about their overall aesthetic? Because I do think that they've at least cultivated something unique because their UI,
for sure,
even though it's running on top of Android Automotive, the UI that they've cultivated and the design language and the colors, because Apollo, in my opinion, one of its best attributes was the creative taste you brought to it in general, and that you took, what is essentially a bunch of angry white guys most of the time, to be honest. As someone who uses Reddit all the time.
Hey, that's like basically the site's tagline, I think. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure, that's their trademark. But even with that, like it brings cleanliness and order to it. When I used Apollo, RIP, I miss it daily. But when you think about that sort of ethos that you tried to bring to a lot of your apps, because I think that's a consistent theme. Everything I've seen you design, you really try to organize and be minimal without just tucking things away the way that I think like Apple design, for instance, these days. I feel like they just shove everything into a hamburger menu or a drawer and they're like, look, it's all clean. It's like that's equivalent to me just pushing everything in the closet and saying, I swear the room is clean.
Just don't look over there.
Hasn't left the house.
Right. No. Well, thank you. No, that's very kind.
So what is your review then of the Rivian aesthetic and the design choices that they've made for some otherwise pretty complicated data sets, right? Like the Energy App 2.0 that just launched, for example, gives you quite a bit of data. What's your read on how they did as far as the design choices?
I feel like I have a lot of feelings. It's overall, I would say it's phenomenal. Like it's, even if most people aren't coming from Tesla, I think it does like hit the same good things Tesla does, where it's not an overly, like there's a lot of functionality in EVs and they do a great job of distilling it down into something that's approachable and revealing like the correct amount of things. Like just like from a nerd perspective, seeing I don't know what screen you call it, but where it shows like the overview of each wheel and how much energy is going into each wheel. Like that's super, I just love seeing that. Like there's nothing like that on my Tesla. And then just the little like touches, like you said, like the gear guard mascot being around the UI, like there's a playfulness to the UI that I think is very friendly, and especially where EVs are probably, I don't want to say scary, but they're intimidating, I suppose, to people
Daunting
coming from
for
ICE
sure.
vehicle.
Yeah.
That's a great word for it. I think that friendliness probably is a little nicer than seeing like this terrifying UI that they can't really understand, because the car is scary and the UI is scary. That's kind of a recipe for disaster.
Just what every parent, everything my parents would want to see is an Excel sheet when they log into their car.
Exactly. Nothing screams friendliness like Excel, but it's, yeah. So I think they do a really, really great job there. That being said, like I do think there's like Steve Jobs always had that quote where it's like design, I'm butchering it, but it was like design is how things work as well. And I will say that things being laggy like they are does make the design feel a little worse in some ways. That like I feel like if you were tapping around and everything was lickety split, like I would feel more strongly about the design just in terms of like the experience of using it and the joy of using it, I guess. And there's little, like for me, one thing that is interesting is like 99% of the time, what is probably taking up 90% of the pixels on my screen is the map. And like that's an area where I think they're just using an inferior map provider than Tesla was, but like it really feels like it's well, if you look at the satellite view, like the Rivian has such a high resolution display, and I swear the images are 480p for like the map tiles. So that like really contrasts in a bad way, especially when that takes up like the vast majority of your screen. Like that's kind of ugly. So I ended up turning that off, even though I have Connect Plus, and going to the bog standard like street level non-satellite view or whatever it's called. And that even like feels like a little morose, like in a like there's not as much like data and color there as maybe I'm used to like on the Tesla side of things. So it's little stuff like they've got so many beautiful parts of the UI, but like I feel like there's aspects that they could just touch up ideally that would make the whole experience elevated for people. And there's little things like I was so excited now having like the screen in front of the driver, like having a Model 3, that's like this novel concept to me.
Who would have thought a display in front of the driver would be useful?
And it's not only useful from the perspective of like obviously there being a screen there, but what I didn't realize is like on my Tesla, like half the screen for whatever reason is taken up a visualization of cars around you, which is like, I know that's probably an upsell to full self-driving, but like that does not do anything for me. And Rivian just having that in the center screen means the driver screen means the whole center screen is just freed up to do actually useful stuff, which is really
literally
cool.
anything else.
Literally anything else. But what also like there's little stuff about that just like I'm just like, maybe I'm a weird user, but like little stuff like the customization I just feel like could be a little better. Like the driver display, it doesn't have any time, which like vexes me all the time, because I'll be like, what time is it? And I have to look at literally the furthest corner away from me. Right. Or the map will be like, it'll have the handy map widget and it'll be like, you'll arrive at 2:48 p.m. And I'm like, what the hell time is it now? Like tell me 13 minutes from now. Like that would be helpful. Like, because if it's saying it's 2:48 p.m. and I don't know if it's 1:48 p.m. now or 2:30 p.m. because I've been driving for hours, like that's not particularly helpful. And little stuff like I'd love to be able to see like what music track is playing at the same time as seeing a map. Like it's like an 11-inch screen in front of me, and there's no possibility to fit both those things and the time. So there's some little things that I'm like, make me scratch my head a little bit more, in that I feel like Tesla had while the UI might not be as pretty and friendly, like some of the practicality things were a little like, the time was in the center of the screen where it's a little easier to see, like little stuff like that I found was just, and again, it might just be they had how many more years of user feedback and whatnot to collect these things. But there's just like, there's some little things where like, again, it's easy for every software developer to come in and say, this is what I would do differently. And then, I go in, tweak everything, and then half the users hate it and go buy a Buick or something. But like for me, I would love to just go around.
That's the least likely outcome, I would say. But yeah.
I would probably, but
they might buy something else, but a Buick is probably not.
Yeah, they don't have any EVs, do they? The Cadillac, they've got some pretty nice ones though. But yeah, I would love to just go in and believe I had the code know-how to just move some things around and add some extra stuff, because I feel like it's 90% there, but that it's like everything where that last 10% can feel like everything, and you're just like, oh, it's so close. But because it's so close, all I can notice is what's missing, and that drives me a little crazy. But I'd say overall they did a bang up job. It's like I had a BMW years ago before the Tesla, and it was like that was a monstrosity of UI. Like I don't know. Like for all the Germans do in other beautiful hardware aspects, like the software on those is should be part of the Geneva Convention or something, because it was torturous to use.
Yeah, well, thankfully I think that Rivian sort of agrees with you, because the binnacle display, which is what the name is of the little screen in front of your steering wheel.
You say binnacle?
Binnacle display, yeah.
Binnacle. What the hell does that mean?
I don't know. That's what it's called.
Is that like a Rivian specific term, or
no?
Or
That's just like a car term. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
But anyway, so that screen's usefulness has dramatically improved even since we've owned the Gen 2, because you've only had it for 2 months, right? So
Gotcha. That's fair.
one of the items is how the map portion, or whatever section you have, whether it's tire pressure, energy efficiency, whatever, how it will kind of squish, and when a song changes, it pushes up, or a critical system notification comes, it'll push up.
Right. I just want that always. No squishing. Perma squish.
Right. So that squish thing is new. Before,
okay.
You had no way of knowing the song unless you were had fully rotated through. Instead of the map, you're like, I'm on music now, and there was no.
I thought you meant fully rotated your body 45 degrees to the furthest corner where the music is displayed, but understood.
Yeah. No, basically you didn't have the sort of impermanence of this notification function. But I could see a situation where maybe in the future they say, hey, do you want to select an A and a B? Because surprisingly, a lot of people don't even know that you can rotate through the panes that are in that left side,
which is the sign of a good designed UI.
When you don't know how to use
when you don't know that there's features there. But thank God they show the music thing sometimes, but they always tell me I'm 98 degrees north. I appreciate that that's always there though, but not what I'm listening to.
Yeah, so I could see them potentially adding, further customization in the future, especially as we see R2 coming out with the more customizable scroll wheels.
Oh, right, those are pretty juiced up.
That are haptic and can actually have hard stops when you're in a UI that stops down, and so different components so there. Cool.
Have you had a chance to play with the prototype, I assume?
I have not, but I have seen the prototype in person, but I was not blessed with being allowed to sit in it and do the scroll wheel demo, unfortunately.
If I can switch roles for a second, what did you think seeing it? I was in New York one week, and it was there the previous week, and I fell to my knees, but it must have been cool.
It's very cool. We hadn't actually taken delivery of our Rivians yet.
Oh, shit.
My stepfather had a Gen 1 Quad T. I had test driven a Quad T, a couple years ago. I've been around them a lot. But we got there and they had it in the Seattle showroom at the time. And there was an R1S still in there, and they had the R2 and the R3X. And my wife was like, the R1S is cool. We're probably going to buy one for her, which we did. But she says, to be honest, I'm more stoked for the R2 than I am for the R1S.
You are, or your wife is?
She is.
Okay.
I think there are attributes about it that I'm stoked about, but as someone who's 6'4" and experienced car camping in a car that now has 6.5 feet of space, and being the R1S,
right,
I'm like, it's going to be hard for me to give that up specifically. But I do miss some of the smallness that we had of our Model Y performance, and the R2 basically takes the Rivian ethos and shrinks it down. It's actually a little bit smaller footprint than the Model Y, which is hard for people to conceptualize.
No shit. That's what I was going to ask.
It was certainly smaller in person than I expected based on all of the footage, and even seeing, Marquez and RJ stand next to it, which I know they're both fairly tall. It was still far smaller than I expected. However, the boxy design of it made you realize, okay, this is a much, much smaller vehicle, but I don't feel that I would be cramped in this at all. You get the clear impression that it probably has much more usable space than a Model Y has had because of the raked roof and get the drop glass, and the fact that the second row in the R2 is more leg room than the second row in the R1S, even though it is dramatically smaller of a vehicle, but it's a 2-row vehicle instead of a 3-row.
So they're not making that. Okay,
right.
Fair enough.
But it's on, I'm 6'4", my mom is 6'1", we are generally, my wife is 5'2", and her whole family's short, so it doesn't matter. But they ride in the back of the R1T.
Did your parents approve of that relationship, or was there some familial No
They didn't
basketball
really-
players coming or anything?
Yeah, no. They love my wife and her family.
Okay,
so
good.
the
Despite
height
her
thing
height.
wasn't a disqualifier.
Oh, good. Okay, they're very
Even
open-minded
if it had been, I probably wouldn't have listened. So there's that. But no, I think the R2 is going to be a smash hit, especially at the price point and with the EV tax credit going away. Like price sensitivity is going to matter more than ever before. But
So then was the R3 like a clown car in comparison then, if you're getting even smaller?
so it was the R3X, which is flared out slightly wider than the R3 would be, but it is notably smaller still than the R2. The R3X gives me like a rally vibe from like a Volkswagen Golf R.
Nice.
So if you took like
That's a good compliment.
it's a hatchback with like rally ethos baked into it. You had cool wheels, flared out. We'll see how much of it makes it to production, right? Like I'm
Right.
sure there'll be quite a few changes. Like the little metal rings you see in the seat. There's no way those are making it to production.
Oh, you think they're like projectiles or something when
No,
sun the brakes?
I think that they're gonna brand people's legs in the sun because they're
That's a good point too. Yeah.
and be uncomfortable in extreme conditions. I think they demo really beautifully, but as you know,
I guess
there's
it's like with the fold down front seats where they somebody looked at that.
but they don't.
those
They don't do that.
Those are
anymore.
gone now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. That's what I mean. Didn't make it too long.
Right. So as the tall guy, I was like, oh, I can make do with this tiny car
Right.
if the front seats fold down, because then I actually get enough space to lay down in it with a mattress. But it's like
What do you
without
think
that.
the deal was there? Was it a regulation thing or was the engineering harder?
They claim it was not based on regulation, but I suspect it had something to do with it, because if you have to remove the headrest of the driver's seat to do it, because that was how they demoed it before, you had to remove the headrest because of the wheel. To be able to clear the wheel. And, I think they're obviously putting an emphasis on removing complexity for every little component. Like, for example, in the R1 vehicles, we have the little colored accent on the headrest. And that, in the dual motors, that's yellow, and in the tri and quad, it's plaid. That little plastic component on every headrest has something like 7 or 11 components to it. So it actually adds quite a, because of the way it's stacked to get that 3D look. So it adds a lot of complexity. And they had a similar aesthetic on the prototype R2, but the ones that they're driving around for production validation, those are deleted, right? So they're really finding every little component. And even if you look at the R1, they're doing rolling hardware changes as well, the way that Tesla does. So like on the passenger side under seat, there's no more cubby. Whereas our cars have that cubby on both the passenger and driver's seat.
Mine doesn't actually have it on the passenger seat.
They deleted it, right?
Yeah.
So and then in the R1S, if you're in the dual motor, ours, because the early builds have the full flap up components on the third row armrests, with single cup holders, and the charger was in the armrest. They made those a single part and gave you 2 cup holders instead, so it doesn't flip open anymore. They've even gone as far as the roof rack mounting points don't have yellow paint on them anymore.
Interesting. I admittedly haven't looked up there. So I'm curious. So
but there's hundreds of little rolling changes
Yeah.
that they've done, and it's unsurprising if anyone's ever followed Tesla, but it's clear that they are obsessing over deleting cost anywhere.
Well, I saw on the new one they got rid of the new as of yesterday. They got rid of the rails in the back or something. So it's
the rails are gone. The mobile charger has been both redesigned and is no longer included. And even on a $120,000 quad motor, you do not get a mobile charger. So there's things like that. But
all right, check this. I just had an idea then for the. We're simplifying parts, but we're also going to let you sleep in the R2. So what you do? What if there was a hole in the front seats? Like someone shot like a cannonball through it, so you can put your head through it when you're sleeping in the back, and
like
you don't
a guillotine, like a guillotine.
No, it's safe. It's like there's padding around the hole. It's almost like a massage seat, like when you put your face in. It's almost like one of those. And then you don't need the extra parts of like an air conditioned seat because you already have airflow going to your back when you're just driving traditional.
And so your kids that are sitting behind you can poke the driver and annoy them.
Right. Well, maybe it could be like the Sunshades where you can pull like a divider down if you want to prevent that, but. Do you think now they would go for that?
Now you have a moving part, so that adds costs. So no way.
That's true. That's fair. All right. Well, we'll leave this to that's a free idea, and they can workshop it a little bit.
Yeah, but no, I think the R2 is going to be a major hit. And I think from the software perspective, we can tie this back to the bugs we're talking about, because the thing that Volkswagen is buying, the thing that's unique about Gen 2, and the thing that is further simplified for R2 is this underlying zonal architecture where they are eliminating so many parts, right? They went from 17 ECUs in Gen 1 to 7 ECUs in Gen 2 to, I think they're dropping down to like 3 or 4 ECUs in R2. They got rid of, I believe it was 1.3 miles of wire in the front wiring harness between Gen 1 and Gen 2, and they got rid of 2.6 additional miles of wire from Gen 2 to R2, which is just bananas.
So by the R3, it's going to be like a speaker wire and a Raspberry Pi, I think. That's wild.
Yeah. And this is all even without going to the super, high voltage architecture. Like you look at, like Cybertruck, right, which went from 12 volt to 48 volt, which has the main benefit of having thinner wires, so you're using less copper, but they are still seemingly using a 12 volt system. They haven't gone to super high voltage battery packs, that kind of stuff. So there's still
so the R2 is still 400 volts, presumably?
They haven't said officially, but I would be shocked if it's anything other than 400 volt.
Right.
I'm actually hot take. I think that the R2 is going to have a bad charging curve.
Well, I mean, the R1's not.
I think it might be worse.
Oh, seriously?
Because they're using the big fat cylindrical cells.
Oh, interesting.
The 4695s, and compared to what's in the R1s, and the R1's main problem, in my opinion, is actually thermal design. I have some screen caps I'll be including in our road trip recap where I was in really hot weather and chargers were totally puking out, and the car was freaking out so bad on a supercharger that I was actually losing battery percentage while plugged into a supercharger on the high end.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it was really kind of, a whole litany of situations to make that possible. But imagine being plugged into a supercharger and it's charging as fast as the car will allow it to, and your battery percentage is going down because the thermal system
Maybe you were charging the other vehicles at the supercharger. You were like the source that was pulling.
I was the first vehicle to home, the V2X.
Yes, which I've been hearing about for a while too.
Yeah, but what I'm getting at, though, is you have all these underlying components that they're having to write firmware for. And my fear on the bugs is I actually find that a lot of the bugs that we run into as far as like lock, unlock, or phone keys being wonky, like, for example, my wife's phone, for some reason, will not repair to my truck. It was paired originally. It will not pair now. They've reset the Bluetooth module. It says setup. The phone says it's in setup. The car says it's in setup. But then when you wait forever, it never works. And while you're doing it, if you go to the Bluetooth, you can see connect to Rivian key, disconnect. Connect to Rivian key, disconnect. Connect to Rivian key, disconnect. And so these are seemingly like underlying core ECU type problems potentially. I don't know because they don't give me access to the logs, so I can't pay my own developers to fix it. Honestly, I probably would. I'd be like, hey, I know you've never worked on this before, but like, go figure this out because you're smart.
Yeah.
So my fear with that is they haven't ironed out enough of those 1 year into production. When you're thinking about what do you have to write for R2, what do you have to write to be an extensible platform that can cover the entire Volkswagen Auto Group suite of brands? So Volkswagen, Audi, Porsche, Lamborghini, like if any of those make an EV, Scout coming in the future, if any of those are EVs, the core concept here is any new EV development will be on these Rivian ECUs. And historically, automakers, including Tesla, right, like look at how poorly Autopilot, well, it doesn't exist on that, but FSD on the Cybertruck performs compared to the Model Y. And that's their own product in their own product
to this
suite.
day?
To this day, FSD performance, based on someone who's not driven a Cybertruck, but other people who own both, consistently say that the FSD performance on Cybertruck is inferior to FSD performance on the Model Y. And so I look at how can you translate that work to be an extensible toolkit for other brands to use, right? So like if Tesla's trying to sell FSD to other auto manufacturers and say, hey, buy our camera and hardware suite and you can train it on your F-150 or your GMC, Denali, Rivian take this ECU platform, this core underlying zonal tech that they can't even squash all the bugs on their own flagship product.
Right.
And then we'll see how well it launches on the R2. They have simplified it further. Maybe that makes their life easier because there's just literally fewer components to write software for. But how do they take that underlying tech and make it available for not only the entire Volkswagen Auto Group, but hopefully sell it to other people? Because, for example, Ford spent several $1 billion trying to build a zonal architecture team. It did not work, and they shut the whole thing down. So that is now a potential prospect to buy from this joint venture between Volkswagen and Rivian, if it works.
So Ford could be another customer, you're saying?
Ford could be a customer.
Wow.
Yeah, correct.
Well,
potentially.
I mean, the optimist would say that potentially all these, like if you're selling a product, like the expectation maybe to do better would be higher, just because they're probably not going to put up the bullshit that you are, for whatever reason, able to put up with. So maybe Volkswagen would just yell a little louder and saying like, turns out like half of our users' wives not being able to connect to the car is a problem for us. So could you fix that? But yeah, no, that's really interesting. The Bluetooth, yeah, it's funny you say that. Like the Bluetooth does drive me crazy to a certain extent too. Like my girlfriend and I, neither of us have any issue unlocking, but it's so funny that we're often driving together and it'll be like, okay, Christian's driving, got it. I'm going to connect to her Bluetooth though. Like there's no way to say these are the same people for whatever reason, which like I just took for granted that Tesla did. So all the time I'll be driving and I'll get a phone call and it just won't show up on the screen or anything at all. And I'll completely miss the phone call and then get home and it'll be like, oh yeah, it was her phone paired to the thing. So unless someone called her phone instead, like there's no way to say like, if this is the driver, use their phone for Bluetooth, which also blows my mind. So like, yeah, it's definitely, I think they need to do a once over on their Bluetooth stack.
Well, I'm optimistic on that particular issue because they have made a huge strides on driver preferences in terms of linking things. So like,
oh, true. You know, even since I've had it. So that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the first one that came that drove us nuts was Apple Music. You couldn't link more than one Apple Music profile. Oh, so really? Whoever the car owner was, like if I hopped in to drive her R1S, it's like, well, I hope she likes whatever I do to her music algorithm because this is what's going to happen, right? And then now it's even as far as, you know, system level settings, which makes a ton of sense, right? But like things like Neil mode is user profile selectable. So if she really likes to use Neil mode and I don't because I'm tall and
that's a great point.
I think the truck looks better in standard ride height than Neil mode.
And I love seeing my girlfriend have to like fall out of the car. It's so funny. So like I always leave Neil mode off. But no, that's a great point. And I guess the flip side of that is it's so easy, like especially coming from a Tesla, to be like, why doesn't it have this feature that I've come to get used to? And like the more I think, like one that drives me crazy on Rivian is I've gotten so used to when Teslas, when you lock it, it automatically rolls up the windows if they were closed. So like all the time I'll go into the grocery store and I'm like, car's locked, nobody's getting in there, and I'll come back and all the windows are still down. That's not very safe. But then I'm like, oh, Tesla has that though. And then I'm like, oh wait, like I'm pretty sure it took like Tesla like 5 years after I got it to add that feature. And it's the same with Spotify. Like I'm like, we're saying like, oh, it's crazy that you needed like 2 separate music accounts, or it only supported 1 music account rather. But like and Teslas do that now too. But for so many years, I remember like I could tell when my girlfriend was coming home from work because my Spotify would stop playing. Like it would just change to whatever song she was listening to. And I'm like, I guess she got in the car and took over. But now it has that. So I guess it's easy to say like, why doesn't Rivian have this standard thing that Tesla has, when it's like, it took even Tesla 5 years potentially to get there. So it's like,
yeah, Tesla had
on a curve a little.
A decade plus head start.
Right.
So
exactly. So
I know that that's fair. And sometimes Rivian does beat Tesla to things.
Oh,
I
for
think
sure.
Is worth noting. I
like
think
even the precondition thing that they just added in the last update, like that drove me crazy on Teslas because they there's so many chargers around here that I guess we're in the middle of nowhere, nobody knows about. So you'd show up to them and you'd be getting like no speed whatsoever. But now I can just precondition it, and that's really handy.
And so that's a good one to bring up as far as like sort of team ethos, I would assume, right? Because on the Tesla world, you know, Elon's mantra is that all user input is error, and so that is not, you know, stepping aside the hubris component of that.
Right.
That also.
What does that mean about his tweeting? That's a lot of input.
Yeah, I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot
pole.
Fair. Yeah, so that also assumes that the algorithms or large language models you're using are perfect, which they're not, right? If they were,
shocker,
you and I would be out of a job for sure.
Right.
Whereas the Rivian ethos is, I think, putting more control in a user's hands. So you look at the software that they've demoed on the new Quad, for example. They have what they call a RAD tuner, and it wasn't, unfortunately, available on the vehicle that I drove yesterday, which is the Gen 2 Quad. But coming in September, you can dramatically change the vehicle dynamics on a performance vehicle. So you can actually bias it to be front or rear wheel drive by what percentages. You can adjust, you know, steering sensitivity. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff in this tuner to give the vehicle a completely different personality. And I think even on a more simplistic level, the variety of drive modes, especially as you go up into the tri-motor or above, is really catering to this concept of people that love their cars and love to have their cars do things for them in a certain way. Seems to be baked into the overall organizational philosophy of Rivian to a certain extent, with one huge hole.
Is it
CarPlay.
fake exhaust sounds? Oh,
CarPlay.
okay. Yeah, that's
CarPlay
fair.
and Android Auto.
Yeah. See, like I am almost purposefully I had a Tesla for 8 years, so I'm like I'm not a big CarPlay knowledge, so I'm like I feel so fortunate that like we had a rental car the other year and it had CarPlay, and I was like I don't want to use this too much because like if I get used to this, like everyone who uses CarPlay once is like I'll never buy another car without this. So it's like I've almost like at a religious level stayed away from it just so it doesn't spoil me too much. But it's like yeah, there's some stuff that even having never used it, I just know would be so nice to have. Just like even if it was just like maps with actual useful traffic data would be really cool. But I assume
Well, here's a question for you. What's your podcast player of choice?
I use Overcast on iOS. So
Because you're a man of style and taste. That's right.
Yeah,
Overcast.
yeah,
It's
no,
on my homepage.
great app.
Smart Speed alone is the killer feature.
It's
And
so good.
I would love to be able to use that. And I don't expect Marco Arment, who makes Overcast and no longer owns a Rivian, unfortunately, due to
Right.
some core hardware issues. For those of us who listen to ATP, I'm sure you do.
Yeah, I caught that one. That was like a month or two before I got mine, so I was like, that's good.
And the gatekeeping that would happen anyway from Rivian of what audio apps can be there,
Right.
that means that it's not on there. I know that for a lot of people that listen to audiobooks, sure they have Audible and that's great, but a lot of people have access to Libby because our local library account gives us access to Libby so we can check out audiobooks included with our library membership. There are a lot of things that CarPlay immediately takes the pressure off of, including not needing to use, in my opinion, very stupid Alexa in the car in a way that does not work properly, and basically just allows all of the voice-based phone activation stuff to happen in a sandbox. Now, they've seemed pretty clear that they want to do an in-house LLM. Have you been reading about their like AI
Like
ambitions?
Rivian specifically or Alexa?
Mm-hmm. A Rivian.
Interesting. No, I hadn't read that. That would be
So they've made some important hires. They have Aiden Gomez, who was one of the original 8 authors of Transformer models. He's temporarily
hire.
on their board of directors through June of next year. So they obviously have ambitious goals, not only using AI to optimize like manufacturing and production, but they want to make a really compelling, in-car AI-based experience, and that's admirable. However, for now, using voice-based anything for texting or querying things off of your phone or when is my next meeting or whatever limits you to actually using your freaking phone, which is
frowned
really
upon.
yeah, it's frowned upon, it's illegal, it's
Yeah.
unsafe, and these are things that the development team could probably solve, honestly, in a weekend by allowing some kind of windowed experience of CarPlay. And would it be great? Probably not. But would it work and be useful and immediately have utility for everyone who uses a Rivian and wants to use those apps? I think so.
Yeah, it's almost like they've got to know that this isn't like a sustainable solution at scale. Like to be like, we are going to build, like, imagine if like in 2008 Apple was like, we're not going to do an app store and said we are going to build every app on the planet. Like people would be like, you're friggin' nuts. Like, and Rivian being like there has to be some middle ground. I almost feel like, whereas if you're not going to let third party apps come in through these channels, I assume like some people wouldn't mind building apps for their platform, and maybe that's still too much control out of Rivian's hands. But being able to let like the Marcos of the world build like an Overcast for Rivian specifically that used like potentially like Rivian styling and like standard UI components, I think would be really cool and maybe help bridge that gap. And maybe Google would want to come in and build a map with their actual like traffic data and routing, which I think would be super helpful versus I assume some open map project that Rivian's using right now. Like stuff like that I think would be really cool, but it seems like they're kind of not committed in either camp, which is definitely a curious one.
Well, the unfortunate part is that Google Maps proper is available to them because they're running on Android Automotive.
So what are they doing? Like, what's the story? Because it's like, it's not using Google, right? Like it's not.
It's using Mapbox for the actual mapping and then OpenStreetMaps for a lot of the data, which is an open source thing. I'm not entirely sure what the full stack is for all of their traffic per se. I do believe this is a core focus for them specifically on maps, but even if maps is completely beautifully resolved with, let's say, what you and I or most people would consider like a real proper first tier mapping solution, there are so many edge cases that I can only imagine their constrained team either isn't interested in doing or couldn't remotely feasibly do, right? Like to your point, if Apple had to create every single app that ever grace the screen of an iPhone, two things would be true. One is we would get a lot of sort of middle of the road vanilla, apps at best, and we would be missing a huge long tail of the market. Like, Pixel Pals would for sure never exist if Apple
that wouldn't
had
be high on their priorities. No, app review would probably be a lot faster though, I bet.
Maybe. Who knows what their internal team works. So, you have teams hiring a bunch of AI engineers working against Siri and whatnot. So who knows? But
that's fair.
I think probably the closest parallel with Apple and Rivian here, though, is actually the loss of control over the App Store guidelines in general. I'm sure you've been looking at, the ruling, at least here in the US, about being forced to allow developers to link to outside payment gateways and
all the Tim Sweeney stuff.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's a broad statement, but no, I have been following that. It's pretty wild. Canada's still pretty where I'm at. They're still pretty watch and see, I think, but it's definitely the tides are moving, and I can almost, from like a pessimistic standpoint, I can almost see where like Apple is being, I guess, under scrutiny for, let's say, being a little judicious with what they allow, and I could almost see why Rivian would be apprehensive about that prospect for like running all the software on their car potentially, you know what I mean? Like if Apple
but CarPlay solves that because it's a projection system, so you're not risking code running on your car. You're having a sandbox projection system for whatever's on the phone. And then from like a branding perspective, let's say Apple somehow lets some kind of not safe for work app through somehow magically, or someone writes something and they're running it in test flight locally, and they're skirting the app rules, and they have something that's undesirable for the Rivian brand to have on the screen of a Rivian. It's very easy to say, well, that was running in a sandbox mode. That wasn't something that we blessed. That was something that Apple or Android for the projection system allowed.
Yeah, it's the projection system, not us. No, and that's fair. I guess I meant like if you I'm sure Apple would never do this, but say like where they are clearly very committed, let's say, to wanting to take like a certain percentage of App Store sales. Like what if that dries up and then 5 years later they're like, okay, if you want to keep using CarPlay going forward, we want 10% of your vehicle sales or something like that. Like I can just see why, if everybody gets used to CarPlay as like this de facto thing, and then Apple maybe in the future makes some decision that Rivian doesn't agree with, and they're like, oh shit, like we have completely tied our horse to this thing that just users expect now, and now we're at the behest of some third-party company. Like I still think they should absolutely do it, but I can see why there's like Apple, especially in the news lately, has seemed like kind of a scary horse to hitch your cart to in any capacity.
A bully.
Yeah, to put it lightly. So I can see why a company like Rivian would be at least a little apprehensive there, but I totally agree that it's still fundamentally the right play, unless they have some other big brain strategy I'm not aware of. Like, even if it was just like, I would love for them to send out a survey and say like, what is the top 10 apps you're missing on your Rivian? And then maybe don't build the entire app store in 2008, but go build like 20 apps. 10. Yeah, the top 10 apps even. Like, go build the Overcast, figure out how to integrate Google, build in the Libby's of the world, like focus on those. And I feel like, honestly, like it seems like the same 10 apps people are complaining on Reddit about not existing on the Rivian, and if they just solve those, I feel like probably like 90% of the CarPlay.
Yeah, they're like here's Waze, here's Apple Podcasts, and here's Libby. Like,
right. Bob's your uncle. Like, yeah, no, stop bugging us now. And probably for 90% of people, that would solve the CarPlay issue. Obviously, the easier solution is just add Android Auto and CarPlay, but like I just feel like there needs to be something needs to give here on the software side of things, because apps are not going away. They're becoming more and more of a thing in our lives, and Rivian not having like any gateway into that does feel short-sighted. But I mean, I guess it's worked out for them so far.
I mean, they are on the list of supposedly officially adding Apple Car Key support to Apple Watch for Gen 2.
So what does that mean? Like, you can leave your phone at home, basically?
To where the ultra wideband and NFC of an Apple Watch or of your iPhone, within proximity, can act the same as basically tapping your Rivian key card.
Oh, interesting. So you would still have the Bluetooth aspect, but you could also just still choose to use your iPhone basically as your key card.
Yeah. So I'm not sure how they're going to actually fully implement it, because I find their Bluetooth to be way too sensitive or not sensitive enough. I either find that it's locking and unlocking from what feels like a mile away, or I'm standing right in front of the car and it's like, come on, I would like you to unlock now, please. It's kind of the middle ground, whereas ultra wideband in theory should be more precise, more reliable, and understand the nuance of, am I standing right in front of the door,
Oh,
or
interesting.
potentially, am I standing in front of the hood for an auto, frunk opening, that kind of thing, potentially.
Oh, so ultra wideband would replace the Bluetooth, and then the NFC would replace the bonking. So you'd potentially replace like the entire existing stack, and hopefully have it be more reliable if they choose to do that, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's technical details of that I'm getting wrong here, but the idea is that more precise and more accurate, because the people that have used Apple Car Key, like for instance, I use Apple Home Key, which is the home version of that.
Right.
So our smart lock, I can just get my watch face right up close to the deadbolt lock, and every single time it will lock or unlock right away.
Nice.
So
yeah, that'd be pretty spiffy.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is they are willing to do. Yeah, they're willing to do a native Apple sanctioned, actual use Apple APIs to make that work, because they've
announced that.
Yeah.
Oh,
it was actually
okay.
in the launch video June 6th of last year, and at WWDC when they talked about the car key component, when they rolled the brands of coming soon, Rivian's logo showed up on the coming soon list.
Oh, no kidding. I totally missed that. I was
Yeah,
there, but I didn't. I think I literally was scanning for it, but there's to Apple's credit quite a few names up there, so I must have just missed it. But
yeah, so I'm surprised though, as an accomplished iOS developer though, that you've actually like avoided using CarPlay. I would have thought that you would have thought, hey, how do I stick a Pixel Pal on CarPlay so they can look at a little Tamagotchi pet or something?
Honestly, like funnily enough, I'm pretty sure you can do that now without any effort on my part, thanks to the recent dub, where it's now like the live activities on your iPhone automatically run. So if I have like the live activity up there, so I think I got that for free without needing to do any work, which was my long-term play. But yeah, I think it's just one of those things where like none of the EVs that have been like super compelling to me have had CarPlay or Android Auto. So I've kind of been like, there's never been like, oh, I can choose between this one that has CarPlay and this one that doesn't. It's mostly been like the ones that interest me just don't have it for whatever reason. So it's kind of been an easy thing to avoid, for better or worse. But I do feel very much like it's one of those things that if I got used to it, I would definitely not want to ever give it up. So I'm glad that I didn't use it before the Rivian.
Well, let me frame it a different way. If they said, hey, you can buy a Rivian A or Rivian B, and they're the exact same price, and otherwise the exact same feature set, but A can never have CarPlay and B absolutely has CarPlay as an option, which one would you pick?
Oh, I think in that case I would definitely choose CarPlay. Like I think it's not like I don't like CarPlay. It's just that like it's more like I know brownies would destroy me, so I'm never gonna have a brownie. Like I just know those would take over my life. I've had brownies, to be clear, but like that kind of thing where you're like, I know this would be too good.
The forbidden fruit.
Exactly. I'm actively avoiding this forbidden fruit because I know once I have that fruit, I would never be able to not have it again. So
which
yeah,
kind of speaks
definitely
to the testament of the fact that they should add it.
They absolutely should, because that little taste I had of the fruit with that rental car, I was like, oh, I can see the appeal here. Like everything is just ready to go right off the bat.
So here's my like nutshell opinion about it, which I know you didn't ask for, but you're gonna get anyway.
I was about to.
Is that I believe that a true first-party curated solution that they're aiming for probably is the best possible case scenario. I think it should be the default scenario, but you will know for a fact that it is the best scenario when you allow a release valve like CarPlay, and you can try to convince people to use the native one, and you will constantly be having to benchmark yourself against the alternative of your experience with CarPlay. Because if you can't beat the CarPlay experience, you're not truly offering a more compelling overall thing, and you don't know that that's actually a real selling point when people buy the car. Because imagine if you could say, for example, Apple has a bunch of stats saying like something like 90% of new buyers would not even consider a car that doesn't have CarPlay, right? It's some huge number. Maybe it's 70%, but it's the overwhelming majority of people would not consider a new car without CarPlay. But if you were Rivian, you could say, hey, we know through our stats that 90% of people who use our cars use our native in-app system over CarPlay that's available. So we can tout that as a marketing feature because we've truly built something valuable that we might even be able to resell to other companies because it's just running on top of Android Automotive. It could be part of the Volkswagen joint venture as an add-on purchase. Like it becomes this marketable asset, and you know with confidence that it really is better. And if they're not picking you, you need to figure out damn well why, and what is CarPlay doing that yours needs to do at least as well, if not better.
Yeah, and I think users would be very happy to tell them. It's almost the same argument with the whole App Store stuff, where it's like if Apple actually had to compete on the App Store front, their own App Store would have to kind of stand on its own and compete with the other ones. And if it still stays as the de facto App Store and the most popular one by a wide margin, that clearly means Apple's done a good amount of work to make this a compelling option. But when it's just you and you have no one to compete with, it's kind of hard to say you're the best because it's never been tested.
It's
But
kind of like when the Super Bowl happens and they call them the world champions in football. It's like, well, but no one else plays that.
those guys in Turkey would just crush them if they ever had the shot. You know it. But yeah, no, I totally hear you.
Cool. Well, I've kept you here for over an hour. This has been a really interesting
really
conversation.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you being here. Do you have any other kind of thoughts about software design, aesthetic, processes that stand out to you about your Rivian experience now that you're a few months in?
That's a great question. I would say just overwhelmingly, it's been phenomenal. Like all these little things that I didn't think I would just come to adore. Like being like this concept of actually having buttons for things, like having a button for the frunk means like I've probably used my frunk in a week more than I have used my Tesla's frunk in 8 years, just because it's like I don't have to whip out a phone and open it and then like all this hoopla about closing it. Like just being able to walk up to it and hit a button is so cool. Like there's all these little touches, like we're having like an AC outlet in the back. Like it drove me bonkers with our Tesla that like we have not the greatest power grid in Nova Scotia, and we would routinely have like times where we'd lose power for like 2 or 3 days. And like beside us, we would have a car that's the equivalent of like 5 Tesla Powerwalls just sitting there, outright refusing to be able to output any energy. So we'd be sitting there like, one day we tried to like light a candle over a cup of water to try to boil water for coffee. That does not work. But like now with the Rivian, like we can just go down, plug a thing in because it's a big battery. And it's like those little things that Rivian is like clearly listening to people about like what makes a car great. And I've come to appreciate those so much that I just love the vehicle. Even though like I will admit like there's some things that drive me crazy about it, but there's also things that drove me crazy about the Tesla. So I just think they're doing such a killer job overall. And I'm just so excited that it's like, it reminds me very much of early Tesla where people like the brand, which is really cool to see again, like going up and people being like, oh my God, what is that? Oh, that's so cool. Like where I haven't like out of a combination of Tesla's brand kind of being shaky lately and them being just so much more common. Like that's not nearly as common a thing anymore. And it's a really fun vehicle to have. So and they're doing so many updates, which is really cool too. Like I remember like for the first few like years I'd have my Tesla, like whenever I talked to my dad, he'd be like, he's not really a computer guy. He'd be like, what new stuff did your Tesla get? And I'd be like, oh, I got this new feature and this new feature. And it seemed like eventually there was a point where dad would call and I'd be like, no, not really. They added like a fart button, but there hasn't really been much in a while. I think Elon's too busy on Twitter or something. But Rivian, I swear to God, it's like every month there's like all this new cool stuff or this new setting that makes everything a little easier. And it's kind of cool. Like maybe that just speaks to the infancy of Rivian versus Tesla when they were back then. And I'm being unfair, but it's cool kind of getting in the ground floor of another EV company and experiencing that magic all over again. So it's if anyone's out there is considering it, I would definitely pick one up. Just remember to use Travis's referral code.
Very kind of you. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I would sort of equate the current Rivian ownership experience to like the early days of having an iPhone, where a lot of people were like, "Hey, I have a phone. That one looks like it's a lot more modern way of doing it. What's unique about it? It sounds like it's kind of expensive. It doesn't have all the features that I necessarily want it to have." But you're like, "Yeah, but last one that didn't have this, now it can copy and paste. Now it can have, MMS. Exactly. Now it can have, these are all things we forget that the phone launched with. The original iPhone was on the dog slow edge network, didn't have copy and paste, couldn't record video. Right? It barely took a photo with a little potato camera. I mean, like it had a lot of serious design constraints, but
the maps were smoother though. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, but it was a beautiful device. It was a joy to use, and the things that it did so exceptionally better than the product category before it that we could overlook some of the gaps. And as the hardware iterations and software iterations went on, we got to have these like really well polished, well oiled, great products. The prices came down and they became ubiquitous, right? And so I think that's the overall trajectory that we're on for EVs, which is great. I hope that the R2 can bring that cost down to that $45,000 price point like they're aiming for. I hope that the R3 and R3X in Georgia can bring that price down. R3X maybe not, it's an enthusiast car, but the actual R3, maybe they can get down to inflation adjusted price of $30K in today's dollars or something. That'd be incredible. At least 35 or so. I think that would be great. And I agree that the thoughtfulness of the design really speaks volumes to, Johnny Ive used to always talk about you could tell if someone cared about a thing when they designed it.
Absolutely.
I feel that with Rivian. You know, when you find that outlet in the right place, or you find the software toggle about having a timer or an automatic thing for power control over that outlet. You know, when you see the playful touches that they did of adding the gear guard, like, are they required for the product to work? No. But do they make it a joy? Do you think that someone sat for a second and considered what this screen meant and what new experiences or new features it unlocked going forward? Yes, and as an owner and a user, that's really fun. And in the overall community experience, I mean, I was having coffee with a guy yesterday after driving that new quad, and I told him, like, the Rivian community is probably at least as much, if not a bigger piece of what makes owning a Rivian fun right now.
Oh, for sure. For sure. And it was honestly like that with the early Tesla community, when it was just like it was a smaller group. It was more enthusiast group, and not to be like gatekeeping and be like, as soon as you add a bunch of people, like hipster style, it loses all the fun. But like there is a inherent familiarity and warmth when it's like a smaller group of people who really are enthusiastic about a brand, and especially when it's a brand that seems to give a shit about its community. Like Rivian does all those cool community events, and that seems like a real part of their story. So yeah, I think they're doing a really good job there.
And it also tends to attract people that, you know, tend to care about things, right? So like our local Rivian chapter here in the greater Seattle area, like they're frequently doing, you know, like they do an annual trash beach cleanup, and they do, you know, trail maintenance,
cool.
and like they're getting out there and they're doing things. I mean, they're beating these, you know, 70, 90, 100, $120,000 trucks to hell, because they're going and they're ripping it in the dunes, and they're fording rivers, and they're doing cool stuff, and they're not necessarily babying it like it's a showpiece per se. I mean, of course that happens as well, but they're getting out there, they're doing things, they're interesting people, and they tend to also have interesting careers, interesting personalities. I mean, I feel like you and I would not have had this opportunity to connect if it hadn't been the Rivian overlap. And so
That's a good way.
I really
No, that's a good
value that.
point. That's true. No, yeah, no, it's very cool. It's all been worth it if just for this.
That's overly kind of you. Well, anyway, Christian, thank you so much for being on. For those of you who have taken the time to listen to this meandering interview, I hope you enjoyed it. Christian is an absolute all-star at development. He's being humble and modest with his thoughts on the product. We're excited to have you in the Rivian community. I really enjoy using your products in the past. I hope to use more of your products in the future. Hopefully, if Rivian opens up some development, that means that you'll make something cool and fun. I know I would be signed up to be user number one if you would let me.
There is no fart app yet.
Well,
Count
you
on
too
it.
can solve your car with a fart app. Pixel Pal farts. Here we go. All right.
Oh my god.
Here's the bear fart. Here's the we got off
It
the
must
rails.
be quite differentiated, I imagine. But
Only if
separate
you're a
podcast.
Connect Plus subscriber though.
True. True.
All right, cool. So if you guys want to learn more about Rivian in general, I actually have a new email newsletter called the Rivian Recap. If you want to sign up for that, you can either use the QR code or go to the link down here in the corner. And if you want to learn about more stuff we've done in the past, like the 6-month review or whatever, here's a video that YouTube thinks that you would enjoy as well. Till next time, stay curious.